All right, awesome. Well, thanks so much for that kind introduction, Jennifer, and welcome everybody to this Lunch and Learn with Innovation Factory. And I'm sure you're going to have some great information from Ian coming up in a few minutes. So I'm just going to jump on here and just introduce Barter Pay real quickly in the next 5 minutes or so. And yeah, we'll just get started for the sake of time. So what is Barter Pay? Barter Pay, what we are, is a business that helps all Canadian businesses across the country get the things that they need without having to use any money. Instead, they can just pay for those things using their own goods and services. And bartering is the oldest form of commerce, right? It's how business was invented. But for two parties to enter into a fair trade, each side has to want what the other person has at the same time and at the same value, or they can't make a fair transaction. So to solve that problem, we've created a platform that allows a business to open an account with Barter Pay, basically establish an account number. They can then offer up their goods or services onto the platform, and in exchange for barter credits. Now, one barter credit equals $1 Canadian for valuation, accounting, and tax purposes. And so these businesses can then bank these barter credits, and regardless of who's acquired their goods or services, they can take that newly earned barter credit and they can go and utilize it with anybody else in the bartering system. Locally, regionally, nationally, soon to be internationally. And so this allows a business to not have to be locked into one-to-one barter transactions, but now it's a one-to-many sort of organized system. So to just illustrate this, we're just going to talk about the problem. Actually, it's called the double coincidence of wants. And essentially that's where, again, those things don't line up. So on the left here, we have a web developer that's looking for some plumbing. And of course, they would like to be able to pay with building a website, but the plumber's like, hey, no thanks, I already have a website. So that's the problem of the one-to-one bartering. It's basically has to almost be serendipitous for it to come together. So again, just to kind of drive home the illustration on the Barter Pay platform, which we call the Barter Pay Loop. Picture this being your business in the middle here, and this is the Barter Pay community around you. These are the already 4,000 businesses on the platform and growing very quickly. So essentially, when you open up your account with Barter Pay, you establish your account number. The first thing we're going to do is we're going to help you market your goods or services, idle time or inventory. We're going to help you market it into the Barter Pay community in exchange, again, for those barter credits one for one. Step 3 is we're going to help you take those newly earned barter credits and utilize them in the Barter Pay community to actually extract the goods and services that you need. And so this is what, again, it's called the Barter Pay Loop. It's infinite system of reciprocity, this sort of sharing, circular bartering economy that's been developing over the last number of years, that allows a business to now acquire the goods and services that they need by paying in their own goods and services. And so even our logo itself represents this, again, this infinite loop of commerce that allows this sort of sharing, bartering, circular economy to actually function properly. The 3 key ways that we really help a business grow and gain a competitive edge. Number 1, we help them increase their cash flow because they can buy at their wholesale cost of time and space, or their wholesale cost of goods. So if you're a service-based business, we all know that any unbilled hour today is not worth anything tomorrow. So it's expiring all the time. And so we want to help you monetize that unsold time into barter credits so that you can now have a value that does not expire and be able to go and use it in the future. If you're in the hard goods business, obviously you probably have from time to time, and especially right now during this COVID time, possibly idle inventory sitting on the shelf. And so we want to help you, rather than touch new cash to do some things that you need to do, we want to help you convert that idle inventory into the things that you need. Quick example, we have a jewelry store in Hamilton who recently, obviously is shut down right now, but they wanted to get a new branding done and some web development. And so rather than actually going and spending $10,000 of their precious cash, they joined the Barter Pay system. We monetized over $13,000 worth of their clearance merchandise into barter credits at retail value, and now they're taking those barter credits and using them with a web development company and a branding company to do their rebrand and their new website. The second way is through access to alternative financing. We do barter loans, so we help businesses get the things that they need even in advance of earning the barter credits. So a restaurant in Hamilton, for example, recently was able to obtain some engineering services. So we loaned them the barter credits to get the engineering. They turned around and paid off the loan over the course of a year by just issuing gift cards to their restaurant back to the Barter Pay system. And so that's a fantastic way to finance something. And then the increased charitable giving to create more social impact. We also are a registered Canadian charity called Barter Pay It Forward Foundation. So we have all these businesses who are buying and selling, banking and spending those credits. They're now taking some of those credits and donating them to our Barter Pay It Forward Foundation. And from there, we take those credits from our foundation and dole them out to charities across the country, who then go back into the same circular economy, the same ecosystem, and extract the goods and services that they need. So this allows businesses to create social impact without having to cut a check, which can be very difficult to do, never mind during the time of COVID right now. So those are the three things that we help with. There's a lot more, but those are just kind of the three highlights. Next steps, if you're interested in learning more about Barter Pay, go to our website, barterpay.ca. We're running about 8 webinars a week right now for product-based businesses, for service-based businesses, for restaurants and other different types of businesses. So just hit barterpay.ca, follow the path, whatever path you want to take, and we'd be glad to educate you further on one of our webinars and onboard you if you're interested. There's our social channels there below, and I could take a couple of quick questions. I've got some time if anybody has a couple of quick questions. Otherwise, I can sign off and turn things back over to Jennifer.
Thank you so much, John. I think, having you here today really goes well with today's topic of embracing the disruption. And I think, the Barter Pay platform is really enabling businesses to embrace these times and leverage, like you said, idle inventory or intellectual property. So thank you for taking the time to share more on Barter Pay with us. And if anybody does have any questions later on, we'll make sure to direct them to you. But do be sure to check any of those links or any of John's upcoming webinars to learn more about Barter Pay.
Perfect.
Thank you so much, John.
Thank you.
Okay, so with that, we will get into today's session, Embracing the Disruption. And we are going to hear from Ian Levitt. Ian is one of our expert advisors at Innovation Factory and someone we enjoy calling upon for a lot of reasons. I look forward to hearing your session today. Ian, so let me just make sure you're unmuted here. Oops. I'm sorry, folks. There we go. Okay, I think we can hear Ian now.
There we go.
There we are. Hi there.
Excellent. Hi.
Awesome. Well, I will let you take over, and look forward to hearing your presentation. And like I said, I'll field some questions for you at the end of your presentation.
Great. Thank you, Jennifer. And thank you, John, for being here and for the introduction. And thank you for inviting me to speak at this different kind of lunch and learn. If I could share a virtual sandwich with you, I would. It's funny how these virtual foods, though, what I've noticed, don't come with virtual calories. I'm looking forward to getting some more exercise this summer. Hope the parks open up soon. But hope you're all being well, and thank you for taking the time to spend your lunch with me and hear a little bit, talk a little bit about disruption. We're talking about things happen, stuff happens. I mean, none of us could have foreseen the pandemic and COVID-19 and the unique challenges that have come with that. Doing presentations from my guest room and home office, certainly not something we would have seen, and has probably been quite the change and disruption for a lot of you. But in general, stuff happens in business, and we have to learn to kind of deal with that, and to, above all else, keep our teams functioning at top capacity. As startups, we know that you care a lot about your businesses, and we talk business, we talk companies as if they are monoliths and entities, but they're really made up of people. And the extent to which those people function for us and perform well, that really is going to decide how well our business runs. So those of you who have tried to hire and find people, that this is tough. It's really tough to find people. I know we're in weird circumstances where some of you are at the point of maybe worrying about keeping your people, but this will pass, and we'll be right back where we were just not too long ago, where there's just far too many roles to fill, and it's really difficult to find good people to fill them. And then, of course, once you have them in your company, it's all about how do we make them be as good as they can be, perform to the best of their ability, so that we can recoup the investment in time and effort we put out there, and bringing them on board and coming up to speed. So we're going to take things from kind of this angle today. We're going to talk about things that happen, but not just COVID, but how you can set yourself up in any situation really, and what it takes to lead through potentially unforeseen changes. because as leaders, the onus is really on leadership, on you as a leadership team and the management team, to create an environment where people understand what the company's direction is, what its ultimate desired end state is if it were succeeding, and then how they can fit into that and contribute. People are motivated to contribute and want to do their best work, and there will undoubtedly be challenges. So how do you overcome that? And it sounds simple, but if we're to look at it, it's a company that has clear vision, has defined goals, is very effective with its communication, and that has an environment of trust. That will allow for an agile business, a place where change can happen, it's expected, and you manage through it as a team. Bottom line is that if you don't have that, kind of the opposite, it's what you would expect. If you don't have vision, if it's unclear or random as to what people's goals are, they don't have clear goals, and there's really either no communication or really poor communication, and there's no trust, either between leadership or between teams or between individuals and their managers, it feels very random. And this is a company that's probably struggling already in a constant state of flux to get through things, and might have that feeling of, oh, if one more thing happens, I don't know how we're going to get through this. So really hard to be agile in that environment. So the bottom line and the underlying theme for the rest of this time today, I'm going to be talking about the ability that managers have to remain agile and allow companies to manage through significant change, and how that is dependent, though, on the extent to which you've kind of got intentional and deliberate systems in place, communication, rhythm of business, long before disruption happens. So that's kind of the spoiler alert for the rest of the talk. So here's what the agenda is going to be. I'm going to paint the picture of the kind of the perfect world, if you want to talk about it that way, right? So if things are working, what does having an agile rhythm of business and performance management process in place, what does that look like if we could paint that picture? Then we're going to talk about what's kind of on the expectation list for managers when disruption happens, because as we said, something will happen, and you still have to be a manager. In fact, you have to go one step further, as we'll see. And last, we'll talk about a specific disruptive scenario that many of you are dealing with, if not all of you, and that is the move to remote work scenarios. Business can't stop. We don't want our teams to stop performing in those scenarios. We want them to do their best work, and we as managers want to support them. How do we lead through that scenario? And I'll give some kind of things to look out for and some best practices to wrap things up. And at the end, hopefully there'll be some time for questions, and we'll gladly take those. And I count on Jennifer to capture those and kind of float them up to us when we get to the end. Okay, so in a perfect world, this is how performance management would function, how you would manage teams achieving their goals. Of course, I'm assuming here that you've gone out, you found your great hires, they're a good fit for the culture, they have the raw skills and the motivation to do the work, and they're looking for direction. And that direction starts from the top, leadership team. This could be all one person if it's just one founder or a couple of co-founders, but it doesn't take too long before you start hiring people where there's some group of individuals that you're going to call your leadership team, the people who set direction. They get together and come up with the vision for what the company is going to be. What does success look like 2 to 5 years down the road, maybe longer, but what is it we're ultimately shooting for? And they try to come up with something that is really concise. This should be a statement that everybody can rally behind. You can think of the old vision statement of Microsoft, a computer on every desktop and in every home, or today's version, mobile first, cloud first. These kind of statements that are easy to remember, but really paint a clear picture of what the ultimate goal of the company is. You then take that kind of high-level picture and start to think about the objectives that need to be executed on to realize that vision. So what is it we have to do? What are the actual tasks, goals at a high level that the leadership team is going to own to deliver on that vision? And we'd want to have some kind of dashboard of metrics that are tracking execution against that. those strategic objectives would then flow down to team managers who are leading people, and they would take those objectives and turn them into objectives for the team. How do we translate the higher level thinking of the leadership team into things that we want our team to execute on and be excellent at? Then at the individual contributor level, the people who are working on those teams, they take those and they figure out, based on their role and their skills and why they were hired, take those objectives and internalize them for themselves and figure out how they're going to execute on those. Now, what's nice about this is we have a flow down right from the top to the bottom of what everybody is supposed to be working on. This lets you have a performance management process or performance review process. Many of you have probably already doing this, but there'd be a twice a year or yearly look at how those objectives are doing in a formal way, where they're documented to say, yes, you're achieving those objectives or you're not. And they'd also be part of a monthly discussion around how things are generally tracking. But it opens the door for this performance review process where we can actually formally assess how an individual is doing and a team is doing against the wishes of the company. Those feed back up to the leadership team and are reported on. And these, of course, should come out regularly from the team, from the leadership team, saying this is how we're tracking, this is where we were, remember, this is our ultimate goal, and this is where we're tracking. And then those are used to feed back into the process for planning purposes. Maybe resources need to be reallocated, shifted around, and it informs how the leadership team might choose to go forward in the future on the objectives to reach its strategic goals. Now, if it wasn't clear going through that, to make all of this work, counts on all kinds of communication at all levels here. So there are regular one-on-one meetings between managers and direct reports. There's leadership team meetings. There are team managers getting together with their peers to talk about how things are going. There are all kinds of conversations happening at all levels and constant communication from the leadership team about how the company as a whole is tracking. So this is great. And this is obviously, again, what I call the perfect world. It's really, really hard to do. But it's worth moving in this direction because as a manager, if everybody is clear and has clear objectives set out in advance, and those are all linked back to what the company is doing, we know that everybody's moving in generally the same direction. We're all headed towards the same goal. And this frees up managers, gives you agility to focus on important day-to-day tasks like evaluating how people are doing, remove roadblocks that come up along the way, give very, very important feedback for people who might be off track a little bit to get back on track. And it's that kind of agility that we ideally want to have. Think about it this way, and the opposite. If you didn't have a leadership team, now, and this happens, the leadership team itself is not in sync, not clear on the vision. They can't, for whatever reason, cannot decide what a common vision should be that we can articulate down the line. So none of the other stuff happens. There is no trickling down or link back or setting of objectives. That's really hard. That makes it really, really difficult. And you can see how people just trip over themselves, maybe trying to guess what the leadership team might want, maybe set objectives that are, great and keep people busy, but they're not in line with something that's going to move the company forward. So the other advantage here is that everybody is moving, using this rhythm of business to move in the right direction, to move towards the strategic vision. It's possible for the leadership team to make shifts when things happen. As we said, stuff happens. Something's going to come up, and we want the entire company to shift gears behind us, still execute in line with our vision. Well, you can set a goal that trickles down and get everybody moving this. This is exactly how companies like Microsoft, where I spent many years there before starting my company, would be credited with being a large company that can move on a dime. Even recently, they went from a desktop and Windows company to this cloud and development shop with Office running on all kinds of platforms, all these great things happening because of the shift in direction caused by the move of companies to the cloud. That was only possible because they have this infrastructure in place and could shift on a dime. It actually did take a couple of years to do it, but without this kind of structure and rhythm of business, there's no way a company like that could have done it. Now, that's the perfect world, but the reality is that, and especially for startups, it's really, really hard to do. And there are a lot of reasons why it's especially hard for startup companies, among other companies. First of all, it's especially fast pace, the environments that startups face. There's all kinds of moving targets. So you might feel, wow, it's really hard to set in kind of goals. You've got day-to-day tasks that are really focused on managing, keeping the business going rather than leading. So how do you get out of that to think about people and to the point where you want to make sure there's this awesome people management process in place? Just doing it at all is to get your head into the game. This is something you have to think about. You came from a world of really trying to get your idea off the ground and get up and running and do fabulous things. This might be the last thing you're thinking about. Learning to delegate. I mentioned trust is important. That company A picture I painted. It's really hard to let go and start trusting other people with your idea and all the hard work you've done today. Going from thinking about teams to now individuals to thinking about teams is something you probably never thought of before. You know, maybe you are a team of two, you and your co-founder, and that worked really well because you were both on the same page and had similar backgrounds and were there from day one to understand the ideas. But what happens when you hire groups of people and have a team or multiple teams that you need to coordinate? That gets a lot tougher and is a dynamic that takes work to get your head around. And finally, getting the word out, learning how to communicate in a way that lets you get things done through others is tougher than you think. Communication, probably say that 1,000 times before the end of this talk, but communication is key to everything. So, you know, back to the ideal, the perfect world, it is really, really hard and takes a lot of investment and effort to put in the kind of discipline to get this rhythm of business and this process of managing people that'll allow you in the end, funny enough, it sounds funny, but more structure to be agile is kind of what you're talking about. But it is worth trying to get that alignment in your business. I showed you the perfect world before, so to kind of bring it back and just to net it out on the kind of things to think about and look at if you're listening to this and thinking, yeah, I'd like to move in this direction. Just 4 simple keys to success. One is, you know, make time to understand that now that you've got teams to manage and you want them to head in the right direction, you're going to have to think about people as a process. It's part of your business rhythm. It's something you have to learn. The good news is business management and these things we're talking about are all learned skills, and you can practice them, learn them, and build them over time. Next is communication. You can't under-communicate. You want to have timely and regular feedback flowing, regular one-on-one meetings, understanding and thinking about who the audience is you're talking to. If it's an individual, what are their strengths and weaknesses? How do I adjust to talk to them? If it's a team, how do they need to hear my message? And they may have to hear your messages over and over again. These are things that you're going to think about all the time, but without communication, 9 times out of 10, communication is the reason these processes fall down in the first place. Setting clear goals for people, yes, it's hard, but you can always set a goal, and you'll hear people say, I've just got, you know, too much on my plate and things change daily and there's no way I can possibly set a goal. And that should be a red flag and prompt you to have a conversation about, okay, let's talk about what you're doing, where you think you're headed, and put specific parameters around that. We won't go into this today, but you've all may have heard of SMART goals. You want things to be on paper to be very specific. You want them to be measurable, things that are actually achievable. They should be relevant to the job, and they should have timing around them so that you're putting a nice box around the goals. And finally, measure performance. Make that part of your regular rhythm of business, whatever the rhythm ends up being that works for you. Have a look at how people are doing against the goals, communicate that feedback, and adjust as necessary. Okay, so let's switch away from that. Let's assume we've got our performance management in place, the team is aligned to the vision and executing. Inevitably, there will be disruption, as we talked about. And what does that mean for you as a leader? as a manager? Well, and I just kind of gave it away. For you as a manager, that means a shift from manager to leadership. Because when things are uncertain, people want and need clear communication. And managing is not enough. You can be a great manager with all kinds of, handle on the business, and you could be doing your best. There comes a time though when you have to lead, which is different than management. You kind of have to manage and lead. And this involves some of the things we're talking about. You have to be able to talk about the vision. People want clarity. What is it that the company is headed for? What do I need to do today? How do I fit in to today's picture? When things happen, again, COVID being a unique situation, but whatever kind of change that would be disruptive in your world, there are going to be challenges, and people want to talk about that and want to see from the leadership some discussion of those challenges and what can be done about it. What are some of the options? How are we working through it with a positive stance? And through all that, with being transparent around these items and talking about them openly, you want to maintain the trust. You've got to have the trust of your team. It's scary for people to live in a world of uncertainty. Whatever communication there is, just has to be more of it when something goes wrong. So another important thing, talking about that shift from manager to leader, is about how you show up as a manager. So this will have a big impact on how you can want to communicate to the best of your ability, but if you don't show up the right way, it's going to land flat. So just a few things. First is executive presence, and by this we mean demonstrating poise under pressure. Right? You might be yourself conflicted in dealing with this challenge, this disruption that's hitting the business. You really want to show self-confidence, choosing your words and your body language carefully, and staying positive in a way that that people can internalize that, and having empathy for them, putting yourself in the shoes of the people you're talking to so that they start to feel better about the situation, even though it could be quite daunting. And I mean, the positivity can be a hard one, I understand, especially as a leader. You may be taking some really bad news yourself and trying to get good with it. And you might have to work hard, but there are ways to there's always something to be grateful for. So you have to just kind of dig deep, find something that you yourself can cling on to celebrate, and celebrate small successes. There's always something that you can find in the company if you look hard enough to celebrate. Priorities have to be managed more than ever before. And this is, as a leader, this is not just sticking to those strategic objectives and executing. This is taking a hard look at them and thinking about the change that just happened, the disruption, and what that means for the company, and telling people, again, where to focus and which priorities maybe shift, which things can be dropped in favor of others. It's your job to figure out which priorities mean the most given the current situation of flux, and communicate those out to people clearly. And last is to keep consistency with a rhythm of business. This is sticking to, even with this time of change, again, the structure gives you some agility. In this time of change, have the rhythm of business that people can count on, regularly scheduled check-ins. People want to hear from you. They want to know the state of the business and continue to know that the company vision is intact, and that there are deliberate actions being taken. The last thing they want is to see randomness from you. And to see an example of this in action, we could look at the current situation and political leadership. Just look at the way our leaders in Canada have been acting during COVID. We've had consistency in daily briefings. Same time of day, you could go and hear. You're going to hear from the Prime Minister and the Premier. The communication is going to be made available through the websites, through social, all kinds of places to see it. And they're reiterating clear messages about what we need to do. Flatten the curve, stay home, wash your hands, over and over and over again. And also messages of hope, though. You're hearing leaders say, we're going to get through this, and all kinds of other things. We're going to take care of you. We don't want you to worry about certain things, right? And then updates. We get updates on case status and the hard numbers. And you can probably read this up on the screen, but even, just to illustrate how powerful this is, even Premier Ford, who we, at times was being compared to maybe being more like the leader in the US, has come through looking like a real leader based on his poise and the way he's communicated and the consistency of messaging. Now, back to talking about business, though. Let's move away from politics. As you're thinking about your own company and how you want to show up as a leader, and based on some of the things I just showed you, it's important to not be too hard on yourself, especially if management of people may have been new to you. Now I'm saying add leadership to that dynamic, and it may sound like a lot to handle. And the fact when you take on a leadership role and you're looking to help others navigate through change and disruption, it can be a real burden that weighs heavy on you. So here are just some points to think about. First off, there is no how-to guide on this. There isn't one on management. Well, there are many on management, but they're really not how-to guides that will help you, because while you can learn the lessons, every situation is different because people. Teams are made up of different people. Each individual needs different things and needs to be communicated to in very different ways. So it's very context dependent when it comes to leading and what you should do. The good news is, because of that, there is no wrong answer, really. I've given you some things to this point that are recommended that you do, and some best practices. But feel free to think creatively. In fact, you should be thinking creatively about innovative ways to meet the demands of whatever your unique situation is. Again, putting people first and thinking about what they need. You've got to give yourself time for you as well in this. I touched on this a little bit earlier, but you are part of this disruption that's happening as well. You have to internalize it and figure out how to get okay with it, or at least to the point where you can communicate with that executive presence that is really important, that people are looking to you for. So it may be, again, searching for something to be grateful for so you can see some positivity, or reach out to, if you can't reach out to anybody within your company because you're kind of that leader position and highest on the totem pole, look at peers or mentors or others in your position that are outside the company, just to share ideas and bounce things off. Whatever it takes for you to get yourself grounded before you go and have to talk to your team about things. And the last one is lead by example, but don't try to do everything. So especially for many of you, there may be this temptation that you see something going wrong with your company, that with the direction that you've taken, this change came along, the temptation might be to jump in and work as hard as you can to take over the reins and just right the ship. It's hard to resist that, but the better course of action is to try to resist that temptation and enable teams, trust the teams, delegate the work, be upfront about what it is you need to accomplish. Again, paint the picture of where the vision is and obstacles that need to overcome, but then let the teams figure out how to do it. It just goes to help building more trust, and in the long run, because other things are bound to happen, you want teams that feel empowered and are able to execute when things get a little tough. Okay, so that was a little bit about the shift from manager to leader, and in general, just where we are so far. We talked about having structure in place so that you can lead with agility when things go wrong, then stepping up when things go wrong to that leadership role and what that might look like. Now, I'm going to just shift and talk about this disruption that many of us have faced. Unless you were lucky enough to have been in a situation where you're already managing a remote workforce, this has caused people through the pandemic to think about this and have to figure out how to deal with the fact that people are now not working in the same office. So how do leaders deal with this? I'm just going to look at a couple of guidelines, give you some best practices to think about as you're quite likely going through this yourself right now. So first off, it's it's amazing that we have the technology that we do today to do even what we're doing here today. And certainly within your teams, you're seeing the ability to collaborate on meetings. There's chat, there's Slack, there's Teams, there's channels, there's WhatsApp, Snap, all these fantastic apps that are there to enable people to work together in separate locations. And that is really great. But you have to keep in mind that these are just tools. They on their own are not going to solve the problems. So, throwing a collaboration tool at a group that already doesn't have a good rhythm around communicating, that's just going to exacerbate a problem that's there already. So you've got to keep in mind that there's a need to invest more time in bringing people up to speed. Starting with, you got to make sure that you even got the right tools to begin with. A lot of us were thrown into the situation and kind of grabbed whatever somebody brought to work. Somebody set up Zoom or somebody set up Teams, and that's where we defaulted to, without having the time really to look at whether it was the right tool. So there's probably an investment in that, and even more than that. It's all fine and well to say, okay, everybody go work at home, but how many of us had webcams and proper keyboards and a proper monitor setup, or even a proper office setup at home at all to be able to do this? So you've got to, as a leader, think about the fact that not everybody has the same setup at home, and may need basic things like webcams and even higher bandwidth internet to be able to do this. So there's an investment on the tools themselves, but also on how to use the tools. Some people may not know how to use the particular choice you've made, and even if everybody knows how to use the tool, there's going to be unique ways that the company is going to want to use it. So what are the guidelines that you want to put out on the use of which tool for what situation, what you should communicate and how much you should communicate. We've all heard nightmares of being overrun with email to the point where you can't even empty your inbox. If you open up chat across the organization, what are the rules around, when is it okay to be on busy or to be interrupted with chat? What kind of tool should I use for what kind of communication? So you may want to invest some time in figuring that out for your org and putting that out there. Again, on the positive side of things, the move to remote should only be helping you get the message out more, not less. So there might be this thought that, how am I going to keep the communication up with people working in different locations? Well, these tools are great. And we already talked about things like Slack team, Slack channels, any messaging apps, whatever fits your company culture. As a leader, this is an opportunity to continue and maybe amp up communication. So on that, communication is key. And as a leader, one of the things you have to be is visible. How do you be visible when you're now no longer in the office? Maintain the connection with the teams. Maintain your regularly scheduled meetings with them. In fact, bump up the frequency of meetings. I know that some companies and some people probably on this call have gone to daily stand-up meetings, which is borrowed from software development, Agile processes, where we start every day, even just a 15-minute call, the whole team to get together and talk about what's happening, where people might need help, and what the plan is for the next day. It's hard, and I made this point earlier, to over-communicate. People want to hear from you as a leader, and they need to hear from you when times are uncertain. And these tools just give you more of an ability to do that, but make sure you're doing that. There's an old adage in marketing and advertising that says people need to hear the same message 7 times before they will act and make a purchase from you. As long as it's consistent and is done in a way people expect, I wouldn't worry too much about over-communicating. As you're putting out your messaging, keep in mind that people want to know about the business still. So that dashboard of how the company is doing and where we're headed is especially important in disruptive times. And there's no reason why being remote should keep you from doing that. In fact, we have these tools to post them and refresh this kind of information even more often. And last is the the ability to gather feedback from people. Feedback and opening the floor to discussions that are open, and showing that you're open to that as a leader is always important. In disruptive times when people are not in the office, to just maybe, sneak into your office and provide some feedback. This is a great time to be doing that over the tools. In fact, you might just want to have the opportunity for people to have outright venting sessions at some point, so they can, just give them 10 minutes to vent and say, we're going to talk about how hard this change is and how crappy it is, and then we're going to talk about solutions. Those are great techniques to use as a leader. Trusting people in this time, I mentioned that's a big part of the process, an important part of having a process in an environment where agility will thrive. It might be hard for you to wrap your head around the fact that people are able to be productive if you're not used to this environment where people work outside the office. But in fact, you try to take the leap and trust that productivity will be just fine. In fact, productivity may improve. People no longer have the commute they used to have, for example, back and forth to work. And being at home, the standard work hours that were of 8 to 5 or 9 to 5 in the office are gone, and people may just end up putting in more hours, not fewer hours. And to that, though, be sensitive to the fact that they might be, the remote location might be quite busy with pets and kids and spouses, especially at this time. Or they may work their schedule around heading to the gym at certain times during the day and getting work done later in the day than you might expect. But have that flexibility and allow them to do that, and trust that the work is going to get done. And the reason why you can do this is because you're not just kind of putting blind trust out. We have that system, and we're monitoring performance, and we're checking in on objectives, and we're doing the formal measurement. You'll know if people are being productive and doing their work or not. What does it look like when they're not? They're not connecting on calls. The work isn't getting done. You can see these things happening, and you can use the tools to even get more updates and real-time views of how the work is getting done than you could before. So don't be afraid to kind of take that leap of trust. The one thing you do miss by having remote is the ability to build connections with the one-off and more informal things that happen while you're in an office environment, like people kind of walking by or just meeting up at the coffee station. So schedule some time for that. Schedule some time for that. Have the ability for people to just connect. Maybe you decide certain channels are just for social talk, and make chat available so people can just ping one another and share as they want. And that could be your way of having an open door policy. Maybe block a time in your calendar. Make sure you don't have back-to-back meetings. Leave a spot in your calendar where people who can feel free to contact you when it's outside of a regularly scheduled meeting. And you need to be more deliberate than you would be in an office where these things can just happen. But this again goes to help you maintaining connection with your team and keeps the communication flowing. To give you just some specific practices around virtual meetings you might hold. So when you have a group, like a team meeting together, it's important to set some ground rules around this. You want to get as much out of them as you can. So things like, please silence your phones, no multitasking. So you ask people not to be emailing while they're also participating on the call. That's why it's nice to have webcams if you can. It just drives some more connection, but not everybody's comfortable using webcams. So you would just kind of lay the ground rules down and say, make sure that you're connecting and spending the time with the meeting to really participate. You allocate some time at the start for non-business stuff, for celebrating some successes, acknowledging whatever success stories might be there. I used to do going around the table, getting everybody just share one thing, one piece of good news, something positive to kick things off, especially now. I mean, we generally are good about starting conversations with how are you doing, everybody healthy, what are you watching on Netflix? Great to start those on your virtual calls as well. And as I said, anything positive you can call out, celebrating somebody's birthday, if you have pictures that you can put up just for a little bit to lighten the mood and drive that connection. again, especially some of us are feeling really isolated right now. And last is make sure everybody gets a chance to be heard. Sometimes on these calls, it's easy to talk over one another, and you want to make sure that everybody's voice is heard. Absolutely, everybody on the call. It's often easy to go down the window of participants in turn, mute everybody else, give the person a chance to talk. They don't have to share anything, but at least make sure that you've heard everybody before the call ends. So with that, we're just coming up on time, and I do want to leave some time for questions. But to wrap up, just a couple of takeaways. Shifting to remote work is just one kind of disruption. And it was timely, so we wanted to talk about it. Your company is going to be faced with many other forms of disruption and change. Some will be highly disruptive, some moderately disruptive. So you'll be better positioned for that, though, to deal with that as managers and leaders. If you have that trust, if you have the rhythm of business that communicates out vision and drives an intentional performance management cycle that's iterative, having all that process in place, that structure gives you agility. So to think about, as you reflect on what you saw today, and maybe thinking about the rest of the presentation, maybe ask yourself these questions. How do I show up as a leader? Is my leadership team aligned? Do I know that top down there's agreement on that vision and that's being communicated out and reflects what we want to do? Does everybody have objectives? Are they clear on those? Are we clear on those? Do teams have the tools they need to execute effectively? And is there consistent communication and at all levels? I mean, communication is king here. How is our communication? What is our culture? Do we foster a culture of feedback? Reflecting on that will be of great assistance. So with that, I'll say thank you, and I will refer back to Jennifer to see if we had any questions come up.
Thank you so much, Ian. Really great session and really great content. I really got a lot of value out of that myself, so I hope all of our attendees did as well. We haven't had any questions trickle in just yet. And your titles, your closing slide, I think kind of addressed my one question that I wanted to ask, but maybe you can really hone in on something and tell us what is the one thing, if people remember anything today, what is the one thing you want them to remember and go forward and work to stay agile, regardless whether it's COVID or something else happening, that they have to embrace the disruption?
Sure. Well, I would say that so what had me, because when we thought about putting this together, we said let's look at COVID as a disruptive force that we can talk about, but let's not just talk about COVID, but let's talk about any kind of disruption and how companies weather through that. And I was thinking about that, and the reason why I ended up going to the kind of content we have here is because this happens. These are the discussions I have with many clients. It doesn't take too long, and sometimes it's just with the second or third hire that a person brings on to their business before they start to realize that, hey, it's really challenging to ensure that this individual is working on what I want them to, and I'm not sure I'm telling them how to do that. So I would say, and I usually end up taking the conversation right from there too. So what's your, put you on the spot. You're able to do a pitch and pitch your value proposition as a startup. Pitch me on your vision. What's your vision? Just state your vision to me. What is the, what is your company going to be known for 5 years? What's the headline about your company? And then tell me how you communicate that out. And that inevitably opens the door to lots of discussions about, oh, you know what? We actually don't get together as leadership team, or I don't really know what my co-founder thinks. This is what I think it is, but I should probably vet that with them. And yeah, we really should take the time to put that down on paper and ask our employees about that and whether they're on board with it. So I would say having the vision, definition, and then the how do we communicate that out discussion. If you do nothing else, that's a huge start to just driving that kind of alignment. Like I can't stress enough how if you're not aligned, forget about handling a situation with agility. You're already coming from a point of weakness.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think that makes a lot of sense, and I know when all this happened for all of us in COVID, you know, our leadership team really emphasized a couple of points, and they never left me. I've kind of, you know, taken those considerations, and they always kind of keep coming up in my mind every time I'm looking at exploring new ways to do things, and it keeps coming back to me. So it makes a ton of sense, and really has been driving my focus on things that I do. So you know, I definitely resonate with that, and your talk. So honestly, nobody has any questions, but so many great comments on your presentation today. Just everyone saying great job. They really enjoyed it. And Isabella suggested having virtual coffee breaks and connecting on a personal level is a key to improving engagement and trust. And you know, you gave some great examples about injecting fun and things like that. So
Great. Well, there are
we
any
were
questions.
just no questions. No
if people
questions.
get to you after and want to hunt me down, you know where to find me, so that's good.
Yeah, we'll definitely make sure we connect you if anybody wants to follow up. I know I was just, because I now work in my dining room and my coworker is now also my husband. I just overheard on his call that they are doing a virtual bingo. So I was just like blown away with how cool that was. So the bingo card is set up with things that are happening in your like new work environment and like your daily life.
Very cool.
And so as you check those things off, like kids screamed on a Zoom call, like, you know, you play virtual bingo. So like there's really lots of great ideas out there for connecting and keeping things fun in these challenging times and staying positive. So thank you for those suggestions in the Q&A field. And thank you so much, Ian, for
my pleasure. Thank you
for your presentation and for this great talk. I know I found it valuable, like I said, and based on the comments, it looks like a lot of people did. So thank you so much again for your time. And for everyone online, you know, keep checking out our events calendar for more upcoming sessions and great content we're trying to put out there to try and help support you all through these challenging times. Yeah, thank you, everybody. Have a great day. Enjoy the rest of your day.
Thank you.
Take care.